Man, what's going on, guys? It has been a long time. I decided to go ahead and take a hiatus from YouTube for a while because honestly, I just wanted to watch shows and read books without having to worry about reviewing them on YouTube. I just wanted to look at stuff and read stuff without the constraints of, oh, I got to put a review up or, I got to talk about this on YouTube and yada yada yada. I just wanted to take a break from YouTube, at least as far as the uploading video thing goes. So the last videos I put up were my rant on Rotten Tomatoes and my rant on DC Comics. In my DC Comics rant, I was like, you know what, I'm pretty much not gonna support anything they do, and I still feel that way. But I decided to just go ahead and stick with the comics as far as that goes. I'm not going to pick up any of their, the new 52 stuff. I'm going to stay away from that. But, I will give their games and shows and other media a try. So, how did I feel about Arrow? This is a show that took me a while to really get into, like 4 to 5 tries. First time I liked it, I put a review up and I didn't like the first episode when it first premiered. Then I kept trying it online. I was like, I can't get into this. But with the recent release of the Blu-ray, I was like, you know what? Let me pick it up and let me just stick with it and watch it all the way through. And so I spent the past weekend watching it and I enjoyed it. I'm not going to say I love it. It's not the greatest thing on television right now or anything like that. It's not perfect, but it is very enjoyable if you stick with it. I say around episode 5 and beyond, it really gets interesting. So there are a lot of things I like about it, and there are a lot of things I don't like about it. I guess I'll talk about the things I do like about it first, and then I'll talk about the stuff I don't. Uh, One of the things I do like about it is actually the tone of the show. I do like the darker take on um, that they're going with on the with this version of Green Arrow, and it works a lot, especially with the flashbacks. The flashbacks are really interesting. I think the flashbacks are even better than the stuff that's going on in the current time. I like the characterization that that the flashbacks provide for Oliver as a character. Um, you know, it's really well done, and I think it's also really well placed in the episodes when it shows up. Because when you do flashbacks, sometimes it can kind of take you out. Like when you do flashbacks the way they do it, and if they're misplaced, it can really take you out of the show. But I think that the flashbacks in here are really well placed, and it really does some interesting stuff for, like I said, as for Oliver as a character. Another thing I really like about here is the supporting cast, the supporting characters, particularly um, what they did with Merlin in here, and I really like John Diggle. John Diggle, I think, is actually even a better character than Oliver. I love John Diggle's character on here. Uh, uh, I think he's a great, original character for a supporting character for Oliver, and I also really like how he's like a past soldier and stuff like that. He fought in the war. The He fought over in Afghanistan and things like that. So he can handle himself. He's not just there, and Oliver doesn't have to go and save him or whatnot. There are even some episodes where he fills in for Oliver as the Hood, as they're calling him on the show, which I think is really cool. So uh, I just really like John Diggle's character. Another supporting character I like is Felicity. Felicity I like a lot. She's a great female character. She's also just a great character overall. I like how she's not afraid to put Oliver in his place when he needs to be put in his place sometimes and whatnot. And I just really dig her character. The actress does a good job. I think those three, Stephen Amell and the guy who plays John Diggle and the lady who plays Felicity, they have good chemistry with each other, and it's really fun to watch them work together. Um, Another thing is, like I said, Merlin. Merlin, I think what they did with Merlin on here was really awesome. I like how they build up to him, and then he became like the Dark Archer, and I was like, great. The fights that he had with Oliver were really well done, and I like that they had him in a costume. It's not the exact costume from the comics, but he was at least in a costume, and he had the persona of Merlin. And the same thing with Oliver. I'm glad that they actually gave him a costume. They didn't play like this isn't Smallville. This is a much better show than Smallville. It has a better start and is not afraid to give us costumes. Um, Even if they're not calling the show Green Arrow, there's still it's still Green Arrow, but they even make a joke about it in here where he's like, what should they call the Hood? And he's like Green Arrow, and he says lame. And I was like, oh, I was kind of like annoyed by that at first, but what they're doing with the show, I can understand why they wouldn't call him Green Arrow. So I do like the costumes. The overall look of the show is great. Uh, excuse me. The fights in here are really well done because, especially for a TV show in the CW, because the CW is notoriously bad for. Is they're notoriously just known for having really poorly done choreographed fights. See Smallville and Supernatural for that. But the fights in here are really well done. It's an action-packed show, and I like that a lot. I like that they're not afraid to give us action, unlike Smallville did. And it just looks really well done. The fights are really intense. They're dark, they're gritty, and they're brutal, and I like it a lot. The archery on here, I think, is really well done. It looks very convincing, and I like that he has different types of arrows. He's not just throwing the typical arrows. He has trick arrows, and another thing I like on here is what they did with Oliver's family, like his sister, his father,
and his mother. I like what they did with his family. His stepfather. I thought that was really neat, especially with his mother and his father's background, that they were not good people. They did some really bad stuff, and Oliver had like this list that he was going down and tracking these people down and killing them off. I really like that a lot. I think that was really neat that they would do that. And I also like how Oliver does kill in here. Uh, the reason I like it is because in the second season they talk about in the first season he's killing people because he's basically frustrated and he's angry at a lot of stuff. He's angry at his mother, he's angry at his father and their past and their history with the city, and he's just angry at what the city has become. It's become so corrupt, and he's using that and he's venting and he's killing people, and that's what it is. Like, and he's trying to justify it, and I like how in season 2 they do touch upon the fact that he was killing just because of that reason, and I think that's an interesting arc for Oliver as a character. But one thing that did bother me though was when he came across Huntress and he's like, you're a murderer, and I'm like, really? Because you've been killing people too, Oliver, more than she has. I just thought that was very hypocritical of him to say that to her. How he was trying to say, you kill people. I'm like, Oliver, so do you, and you probably killed more people than she has. So yeah, so I thought that was a bit hypocritical, but I like the arc and the reason that he comes up for killing people in the show. Uh, I also think that the episodes as a whole are pretty well written. Like, it's not perfect, but it's pretty well done. It's pretty solid stuff. It's well paced. I think it's pretty decently acted. There are some problems I do have with the acting on here, and that's to be expected with the CW, especially in the beginning when the shows first start. But the acting overall is pretty well done. I do think that the whole him trying to, like, the whole thing when he says, he's like, you have failed this city. That's a little overdone. I'm gonna say a lot overdone, actually, because it's kind of cheesy. Um, but yeah. So now I'm gonna start talking about the stuff I don't like. Yeah, that's one of the things I don't like. The whole you have failed this city, and I don't like how the show feels too Batman. Like it's the dark parts just feel too much like Batman. I know that they're trying to draw inspirations from Nolan's Batman trilogy, but sometimes they just take exact scenes from Batman Begins and whatnot. Like the whole thing where Oliver is like he gets beat up and he gets thrown into like an alley or something like that, and he's calling for Diggle, and I'm like, that's the exact scene where Scarecrow pretty much owns Batman in that scene in Batman Begins, and he falls and he puts him on fire and whatnot, and he's like, Alfred, save me, and he's like distraught and whatnot because of the fear toxin. I'm like, that's the exact same scene. And they did that for like some other stuff too, like the bank robbers and whatnot. I feel like that was a little bit too much like from the Dark Knight and whatnot. But it's really not that bad. It's just like that's blatantly ripping off what Nolan did with the Batman trilogy. And I don't like the voice thing. I don't like the paint on the face. I think that's a bit stupid. But in contrast with the show, in the context of the show, it does actually work because he was stuck on an island. It would make sense that he would, think of paint on his face, for this concrete jungle or concrete island, if you will, that is Starling City. So it does kind of work for the show if you think about it like that. Another thing I do like, kind of going back and forth on that, is what they did with Slade Wilson, Deathstroke in here, I think is actually pretty neat. I think the fact that he has this history with Slade on the island is going to be really cool when Slade does take on the Deathstroke persona. Hopefully he does in this show. I think that's going to be really neat, that they're going to have history, and when Slade really does become the Slade, or closer to the Slade we all know and love, it's going to be really cool to see their dynamic. Another thing is the Triad. The Triad, it was really well done on here. I like how they did that on the show. Oh, another thing I don't like is the forced romance. I really don't like. I'm not going to say I hate Laurel's character, but I really don't like the forced romance, the love triangle she had with Merlin's son and Oliver, and Oliver like cheated on her with her sister and whatnot, and they kept going back and forth on that. That to me just became, that really kind of took me out of the show. That was doing that too much, especially towards the end. I'm like, come on, can we please stop with the whole love triangle crap? And it was just so forced and annoying. But I don't like also how in the end Merlin was killed off. I don't like that. I think they could have done a lot more with Merlin. He could have been a reoccurring character. But, as they killed him off, hopefully some other character comes on and takes on Merlin persona. But I did like how his son was killed off, because it showed that Oliver is going to have to come over his killing thing. And that's a good reason, too. That's a good motivation for him to not be a killer anymore, or to not always kill. But yeah, I'm disappointed what they did with Merlin. I like the plan that Merlin came up with. That was a very comic book-esque plan, to destroy the Glades, to blow the Glades up. Again, it felt a little bit too much like, Bane's plan in Dark Knight Rises, but it's a little different here. And I really like how they executed it. It was really well done, and I just really thought it was neat. I'm trying to think of some other stuff I didn't like. Laurel's father, I think he's a pretty good character. Obviously, he's supposed to be like a Commissioner Gordon-like character, but I do like how he doesn't like vigilantes. He doesn't like the hood and whatnot. I think that's pretty neat. I think his relationship with his daughter kept going on a little bit too long. I think that was dragged out, how he kept blaming himself for his daughter's death, or he kept blaming Oliver for his daughter's death and whatnot, and they kept going back and forth with him and his daughter, and that to me was a little bit too stretched out. But as a whole, this show is pretty enjoyable. I think it has a lot of promise. I think the first season, you watch it through and you stick with it, I think you're going to enjoy it. I think you're going to really like this take on it. It's not the comics. It's not that at all. It's not exactly like the comics. It's not an exact adaptation. But for what they're going for a Nolanized type version of Green Arrow, it works. And from what I've seen in the second season, it's really becoming more and more like what I want from this franchise or this show. I do want Oliver to lighten up more, maybe crack some jokes. Also, I like what they're doing with Roy Harper. I like what they did with Roy. His relationship with Oliver's sister. That's gonna be really neat, and hopefully he becomes Red Arrow sometime down the line. Oh, also, Diggle's relationship with, excuse me, Diggle's relationship with Deadshot is really neat. I like that a lot. I like that he has a personal vendetta with Diggle. The whole idea that Deadshot killed his brother, I'm like, that's cool. I'm liking that a lot. I like the whole assassin type thing that they have going on with this show. It's really, really cool. So as a whole, I would give this show, like I'd say it's a 7 out of 10 blood drops. Pretty fair. It's like I said, I keep saying it's not perfect, but it's very enjoyable if you give it a try. And that is all I have to say about it. And I'll do a review of season 2 when it's complete. And I'm out.